Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, geeks and nerds and ambassadors everywhere, and welcome back to the Ambassadorial Wing. And hope y'all are having a great Saturday night. We are back with a brand new modern pop review. And tonight, I am joined by my good friend. You know him, you love him. Well, I hope you all do. Mr. Zach Leary. And tonight, we are going to be wrapping up the review series on Obi-Wan Kenobi. And as always, if this is your first visit to the Ambassadorial Wing, welcome. I hope you enjoy your time here. Hope you enjoy the stream. And as I often do, if you want to join the stream, you don't have to ask, you don't have to beg, you don't have to pay anything extra. Just hit that link and come on in and say hello there. And join me and Zach as we give our thoughts on episodes 5 and 6 and the series in total of Obi-Wan Kenobi. And Zach, my friend, good to have you back. Glad you're here. And, well, as I often say, we don't stand on a bunch of ceremony here. You don't get a 15-minute intro. We do quick. We get in there and we get going with the fun. So, your thoughts, episodes 5 and 6 of Obi-Wan Kenobi, because it's been a little bit since you and I have talked about this.
The strongest two episodes of the show, by far.
I think the beginning was pretty strong, but yeah, I will have to agree.
You know, I think Disney would have saved themselves a little bit of pain if they had just dropped the whole series on one, on the same day.
Maybe just a little bit.
I mean, what's the purpose of doing a weekly show? It's especially with something that could be as controversial as this. They could have saved themselves some trouble, I think.
I think in part they've kind of backed themselves into a bit of a corner, but it's not a corner that's inescapable. Netflix has done the whole dump all at once format, and for the longest time it's worked. And to varying degrees, the weekly drop has been successful, and at the same time, it has been a detriment to some of their series.
Critically, a critical detriment, not necessarily viewership or anything like that, but
yeah,
it's. Do you want the reputation of your show to be good, or do you want it to make money? That's the question.
I think a bit of both is probably what is in the minds of the executives over there at Lucasfilm and at Disney. But in this particular case, in terms of Kenobi, I think maybe dropping the whole thing all at once would have been a much better idea, honestly. I mean, this was originally supposed to be a movie just in and of itself. This was originally pitched as a movie, but they decided to go with a 6-part miniseries. And, these series that Disney and also HBO Max and everything have been doing over the last couple of years are they do harken back a little bit to the old TV miniseries, the broadcast TV miniseries of like the 70s and the 80s, and those were very successful. I mean, you watch them now, and yeah, some of the effects might be a little bit dated and everything, but the stories are very engaging. But I think, yeah, I have to honestly agree. I mean, because the more I watch these series, and this is something I'm going to be adopting in the future. I know I broke with that a little bit for Book of Boba Fett, and Moon Knight, but I think going forward, I'm going to hold off doing the weekly reviews. I'm just going to review the series as a whole once the whole things are done.
Yeah, that's
Because
better. I
honestly,
mean, it's so tricky because you're judging something that you don't have a full picture of.
yeah, you really do. Now, in terms of Kenobi, um, these last two episodes, to quote a good friend of mine, several good friends of mine, a term they used, they were banger. And that's another way of saying they were really, really good. And yes, I have to agree. Episodes 5 and 6 were absolutely banger on this series. And I was very pleased with how the series concluded. I loved, and yes, just so you all know, this will be full spoilers. So if you haven't watched episodes 5 and 6, what are you doing here? Go watch episodes 5 and 6 and then get your ass back over here. So, and shout out to the chat, Ferris Geeks World. Ferris, it is always good to see you, buddy. Appreciate you popping in. Says, let me pop your comment up here, Ferris. Hey, Ambassador and Zach. Hope you guys are doing well. Yep, can't complain. Out of the previous episodes, the finale is my favorite because we got to see Obi-Wan and Darth Vader's duel. Yeah, and that right there, I think, was the duel we were all waiting for. And I think, at least for me, it most certainly delivered. I mean, there was actually a couple of very interesting and very intense, emotionally intense duels in these last two episodes. One between, of course, obviously between Obi-Wan and Vader, and the other one, of course, between Reva and Vader.
Which, by the
And
way, I think is the best fight of the series. The Reva fight, I think, is the best one. There was something cool about it with two dark side characters fighting each other.
Mhm.
It's cool seeing Vader by himself, not involved with Kenobi. It kind of
Yes.
gives you a taste of what a Vader show would be like. Um, but I will say this: the Kenobi Vader fight at the end had one of my favorite lines in the history of the franchise, which
Mhm.
is, "You didn't kill Anakin, I did," which is really a creepy line if you think about it. And he's got that little half
That
Joker smile. What a fucking cool line!
that whole exchange. I mean, me and Mam Ambassador watched it. I think it was Wednesday evening when I got home from work because we were waiting. She was waiting on me. She's like, "Okay, are we going to watch it?" I'm like, "Yeah, we're going to watch it." She's like, "All right, good." But yeah, that whole exchange for me was it was absolutely brilliant. It was absolutely brilliant. The choreography I thought was very good in terms of I mean, these are two guys who haven't wielded a saber in now I'm talking about Hayden Christensen and Ewan McGregor since 2003. But seeing them go through the choreography, seeing them go through this fight, it was gorgeous. I mean, it was like they had not missed a step in a lot of ways. I mean, if you consider how much time and effort um, they put into their fight choreography for Revenge of the Sith, and to see them come back, and I think in a lot of ways, a lot of that muscle memory was still there for Christensen and for McGregor. They did a bang up job. They
Yeah,
absolutely
it's
did.
got to be a pain in the ass to fight in a Darth Vader suit.
It is because, here's the thing. We've never really seen Vader fight someone on his same level before. We never really have. Now Luke was kind of close to his level in Return of the Jedi, but Luke wasn't fully trained. This is the first time that we have seen Vader at this point in his life, and he's still working out how to fight in this new manner because Vader slash Anakin had to figure out a brand new way in how he was going to deal with lightsaber combat, and to see Vader at this point in his life was absolutely it was kick ass. I mean, you want to talk about awesome, and you said it and everything just a few minutes ago, Zach. seeing the Reva fight between Vader. Vader didn't even use his own damn saber. He used the Force, and he used the other half of her saber. So, and I do want to say hello to the chat, Marcus Cruz. Marcus, it is good to see you. Pleasure always having you here. I'll bring up your comment real quick, bud. 1 second. Ambassador, Star Killers possibly now after this series, especially Star Killers possibly now after this series, especially rumors of being recanonized in Jedi Fallen Order 2. And we'll have to wait and see, Marcus. I'm not so sure about that. So, but I'll bring up your comment
That'd
here,
be
Ferris.
interesting,
And,
though.
yeah. And hey, Ferris, if you're wanting to hop in with me and Zach and join us or anything, I have popped the link up in the chat. So if you're not having family things going on, you want to join us, links there, bud. Do it. The part that hit me the most is when seeing Hayden Christensen as Vader saying, "I'm not your failure, Obi-Wan. You didn't kill Anakin Skywalker." Yeah, absolutely. So,
Well,
and
I talked a little bit about this
mhm.
on Tim's stream on the episode, and you know, that's kind of the first time that you see the demon within Anakin talking. You know, you see that something has totally taken him over. You know, as Lucas said, Palpatine is the devil. You see a guy who's been fully possessed by evil, and he is that we're seeing a character who, differently than in the original trilogy, and if you disagree, let me know. I'd be interested to hear if you do disagree. A character who in the OT is basically going through the motions, and just he's got a job and he's just doing his job. There's no real, you know, you compare the intensity of this version to that version, you see a guy who was kind of mellowed a bit in the original trilogy. So I think in this case, we see a guy who is actively, you know, full on immersed in that evil, in that, you know, wickedness, that possession.
I'm not going to necessarily disagree, but I offer a differing take. Because if you remember at the end of the final episode, well, not the end, but the final time we see Vader in episode 6, when he's talking with Palpatine, and I will just say this: it was great to see Ian McDermott back, even if it was just him in a hologram. Great to see him back in the makeup. Great to see him, even if it was just for a few minutes and everything. Him and Vader, and he's like goading Anakin. He's like, "I wonder, perhaps, Lord Vader, if overcoming your past is becoming more of an issue." And Vader's like, "Oh crap, okay." And he's like, "Obi-Wan means nothing. I serve you and you alone." And I think that was Palpatine's way of saying, "Drop it, or I will replace you."
Yeah, well, I think the line is it cuts off, which is interesting. Palpatine doesn't finish that sentence. He says, "If your past cannot be overcome," and he does a little face, which is like, "I'm gonna have to fucking kill you." Basically, I mean, that's a threat.
Yeah, yeah, essentially. And I can't say, because here's the thing: Kenobi has beaten him twice now. Once as Anakin, now as Vader.
So
Of course, we
it's 2-1.
essentially, yeah, because Vader does get him, sort of, at least from his point of view. He killed Obi-Wan, but in fact, Obi-Wan transcended the physical realm and became a
Well,
Force
no, I mean, I'm
apparition.
talking about like episode 3, I think, episode 2.
Okay, yeah, well, yeah, it is 2-1 at this point because Vader does kill him in episode 4, obviously, or at least he thinks he killed him. So, but I've got Ferris's comment up here, and I have to agree. Ewan McGregor really broke me when he said, "I am sorry, Anakin." And then my friend is truly dead. Goodbye, Darth. Yeah, because that's what he
That
refers to him
line
as.
could have been a little stronger, in my opinion. Not that it didn't work or it sucks, but they could have said something a little bit, I think, more.
Well, it's a bit of a callback to what Luke says to Vader in Return of the Jedi, that my father is truly dead.
Yeah, no, I get that, but like, for example, just the "I'm sorry" works a lot better. You know, I don't know. Could it have been, you know, maybe cleaned up a tad? I think that's possible.
maybe, but it's one line. I think honestly, I will say this much for Kenobi in total in terms of the series. The writing for this series, for I would say about 80%, was extremely well written. They did redeem Riva in the last two episodes, especially, but her start off point was very, very shaky. Now, I really liked what Riva's the conclusion of her arc, where we find out that she's not actually working for the Inquisitor. She's not even working for the Empire. She's just trying to go after Anakin. But the fact that he knew the whole damn time who she was, it was just a massive screw you to her from Vader. Like, I knew who you were. I knew what you were. I would even say he maybe even knew what she was going to try and do to him. And then when the Grand Inquisitor comes back in and he's like, surprise, I'm still alive. And we're like, yep, we knew you were still alive. And I know there have been people out there who have been like, oh, that's not realistic. Actually, it's incredibly realistic in terms of the universe. Because if you
Well,
are a dark sider, go ahead.
we keep seeing people get stabbed and shot, and it's like, come on, you could do it better. It's like throw Reeve off a cliff instead. I don't
That
know.
was.
It was well. Do
Go
you
ahead.
agree though that it's like, I mean, okay, why even stab her, right? Why even stab her? Um, I don't know. She's right there for the death blow. Why not take it?
I think in some ways they felt they had already beaten her, and to make her suffer further was just a bit more of a screw you to her. I understand what you're saying in terms of logic,
Yeah.
but on the flip side of that same logic, what's the greater thing? To leave your enemy broken, and most likely they figure she is going to die because they figure she doesn't have the rage inside her to keep herself alive, when in fact
No,
we
I
find out she
gotcha.
does.
Yeah, I gotcha. But my thing
So,
is like,
mhm.
you got two main characters stabbed in the chest with a lightsaber. It's just like a repetitive thing. It's like throw her off a
It is a
cliff
bit.
or do something else. And it's not even a bitch or complaint thing.
Mhm.
It's what would you say? Constructive criticism. It's like throw her
Yeah,
off a
no,
cliff.
I get it.
You know, um, you know,
Or
but it's
even,
it's interesting though the way they're portraying the lightsabers, and you know how you can survive that. I mean, so I guess hate kept them alive, right? Both of them. Inquisitor
mhm.
basically says that, the Grand Inquisitor. But so basically, Qui-Gon died because he was at peace from his wound, right?
Well, it boils down to the nature of the Force. The dark side can keep you alive through rage and anger. The light side, you're more accepting of your fate because you realize that you will become one with the Force. It's kind of how the lore works and how the Force has been kind of explained within the canon of the films and the old expanded universe and so on. So,
So the dark side is more, you know, crafting your own fate, I guess.
and well, I know this is something you may or may not be familiar with, but it goes back to part of the code of the Sith, and there's actually a code of the Jedi as well. And yeah, what you just said just kind of folds very nicely into the code of the Sith. So, I do want to say hello to the chat, J Man. J Man, it's been a minute, bud. Appreciate you popping by. Good to see you as always. Let's see. Hey, all Riva literally threatened poor people, chopped that woman's arm off, and wanted to kill Leia. But wait, she was really good all the time. Was that explained? I don't think she was good the whole time. I don't think she was honestly good at all. She was driven by revenge, and she would use any means necessary to get said revenge. So, do I think to that degree was it explained? Yes. Could it maybe been explained a bit better? Yeah, I think there was room for improvement. But at the same time, considering what we got of Riva, I think what they did with the 6 episodes and her involvement in those 6 episodes, we got a pretty good idea that this was a woman that was extremely driven by her goal, and her goal was ultimately to kill Anakin Skywalker in revenge upon what he did at the Jedi Temple. And obviously, she was going after the silver medal. If she can't kill Anakin, then she's going to kill something that's close to him, and that's of course the sun. Now, I do have a bit of a critique here in terms of episode 5 and the fact that Haja, the fake Jedi from episode 2, just so happens to drop that holographic projector. Granted, it's damaged. That for me was just a little bothersome because you're like, okay, and not to mention this, I found it just a bit bothersome that Bale sends a transmission to Obi-Wan when he said, I know we agreed no communiques, but he's like, I'm getting worried. That for me, I had a bit of an issue with because it like I say, it goes into that 20% of the writing that I didn't necessarily agree with.
Well, it's like, wasn't it busted in half or something?
It was damaged, but it still functioned just enough for her to figure out what Bale was saying to Obi-Wan, essentially. I had a bit of an issue. And now the other issue I had, this is just kind of a nitpick more than anything. And that's how the hell did Riva get off Jabeam? Now, I don't necessarily need to see her get off Jabeam, but at least show a shot of her in a ship, leaving Jabeam and going to Tatooine. Show me something. Show me how she got off that, because they left her there under at least under the impression that she didn't. There weren't any other ships there unless there was another Imperial outpost or there was another ship somewhere. Something, anything, or maybe she took. Maybe they left one of the transport ships behind. We don't know. One of the Imperial transport ships that they used to bring all those troops down onto the surface. That for me was just a bit of a plot hole. And one other thing I will say, and J-Man, I do see your comments. I will get to them here in just a minute. One other plot point that really bothered me is I definitely want your take on this. I almost got the impression that we were going to see Bail Organa show up with troops there on Tatooine. But there's no payoff for that. The next time we see Bail and his wife and Leia is back on Alderaan. What did you think?
Should he have sent troops?
Do I think should he have sent troops or should he have come with troops himself? Because he said...
You mean to protect Luke?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But there's no payoff there.
Does he know that Luke is in danger?
Well, he's the one that sent the communique to Obi-Wan and everything. And he's the one that says, I will go to Tatooine to protect the boy. But we never see him. We never see him. We never see any troops. We don't see Jack Diddley.
Yeah, I honestly don't recall that, but I'll take your word for it.
Well, Zach, it was in the hologram. It was in the hologram projector, the portable hologram projector that got busted.
Well, like I said, I don't recall, but I'll take your word for it. If they had him say that, they definitely should have done a payoff. I mean, it doesn't make sense to say that for no reason.
Yeah, except to give Riva a clue as to another target that potentially would draw Obi-Wan to her or something along those lines. So, let's see. I'll bring up J-Man's comment here real quick. Also, I may have missed this, but why was Leia kidnapped at the beginning? That's a legit question.
To
Leia
lure
was
out Obi-Wan.
essentially she was kidnapped. It was a whole setup by Riva to lure Obi-Wan into a situation that would draw Vader out into the open so that Riva could go after him, essentially. So that's long and short of why Leia was kidnapped in the first place. Now, to kind of move away from the critique and talk about what I liked, and obviously what we liked, I will say the entire the sequence where they're on the ship after they. Okay, before we get into that, this is kind of more of a geek thing for me, but seeing Vader literally bring that other transport ship back down to the surface and just rip the side out of it, for me, that was just absolutely, it was absolutely badass. I love that.
Yes, yes, I agree, but a little, if I was making the episode, I would have framed it in a less like Guardians of the Galaxy way where the second one takes off right behind it. You know, I don't know. I mean, great moment, but I'm not going to say ruined because I don't feel that way. Hindered by the other transport taking off, kind of in a comedic way.
I didn't necessarily see it as a comedic. I saw it more maybe in more of a lens of a gotcha. But yeah, I do see your point. So okay, let me bring up your comment here, J Man. I mean, how did Riva know that Kenobi and Leia were connected? I don't think that necessarily Riva knew that Leia and Kenobi were connected, but she may have known that
Him and
or
Bale.
Bale
Yeah.
and Kenobi were connected.
Yeah,
That would be
that's what it was. When she's talking to the Inquisitors, explaining herself in that episode when they come, "What the fuck are you doing, Riva?" And she's like, "Hey, I checked the archives and found a connection between Organa and Kenobi."
yeah. So
I think
that
that's
for me,
exactly what she says.
yeah, something to that extent, yeah. So, but in terms of uh, Kenobi and the one leader and everything, Roken, I like the exchange between the two of them in episode 6, just before Kenobi leaves in the smaller craft to go down to draw Vader and them off, and everything to chase him instead. He's like, "You are a good man, and you are a leader, and right now people are going to need people like others are going to need people like you." And Roken's like, "I just do what I can to help others," and he's like, "Right now, that's what people need." And this is like I mentioned in, I think it was episode 3 or episode 4. This is the groundwork for what will eventually become the Rebel Alliance, essentially. I mean, we saw bits and pieces of it in deleted scenes in Revenge of the Sith and everything, but this is the first time we've seen it, at least in live action, though we did see it in Rebels, and we also saw it in the first the two Force Unleashed games, though those have since been decanonized, of the rebellion in its infancy. And that for me is a very interesting period in terms of the history of the Star Wars universe. Because you've just got people who are trying to do these small little things to help Jedi get clear of the Empire or help people who have become refugees find a new start, find a new place to live and have some sort of normalcy, some sort of life outside of the Empire, maybe. And you see slowly Kenobi start to believe in what they're doing. You even see him take up arms, especially in episode 5. He kind of leans back into that whole General Kenobi mindset. And that was actually kind of a cool thing to see in episode 5, especially.
Well, you also see how the Jedi are heroes to the rebels.
Yeah.
And it's not hard to see how the Jedi, in the minds of a lot of people, would be a symbol of protection, and
Mm-hmm.
of righteousness and so forth.
Yeah.
The formation of the empire was only facilitated by the destruction of them. So
Mm-hmm.
without taking them out, I think Palpatine would have a harder time, um, doing what he did. But it also goes to show why Luke was such a big deal, not only in the original trilogy, but also in the sequel trilogy. What a symbol he had become. Am I going to walk out with a laser sword? It boosts morale, Luke. Just him being there, just the presence of a Jedi can inspire.
Yeah, and it people have compared this series and in some ways to The Last Jedi and said this is the point that they missed in terms of what they did with Luke in comparison to what Obi-Wan did. Now, Obi-Wan obviously was very reticent at the start to even leave Tatooine, to leave Luke. And we do see a bit of a consequence of him leaving. But at the same time, we also see that Kenobi realizes that he does have a bigger part to play possibly in the future besides just training Luke. And I will say this. I do like the fact that Owen does soften to Obi-Wan just a little bit at the end of episode 6 and says, "Hey, do you want to meet him?" And we see Obi-Wan walk up to a young Luke with the small model of the T-16 Skyhopper in his hand. Now, we don't get to see any interaction between them per se, and I kind of wish we had, but at the same time, it doesn't bother me that we didn't. But the fact that Owen himself, considering what he said to Obi-Wan at the start of this series, I think Owen's perspective on Kenobi has changed somewhat here. And I will say this for Owen and Beru, they gave as good as they got when they were trying to hold off Reva. I didn't think they would be able to do much against her, but considering the fact that she was wounded, I think she did I didn't necessarily see it that way, but okay, but so, but I have to admit that whole fight between Beru and Owen and Reva, it had a lot of attention to it. So, Zach, how did you feel about it?
The whole thing of her going to track down Luke was a bit confusing to me. Um, I mean, I just don't get the purpose of what she's trying to accomplish. Get revenge on Kenobi for betraying her. Well, he didn't really betray her. Um, yeah, it just, but here's another thing. I mean, if you're going to kill Darth Vader, you got to kill him when he's in the tank. You're not going to sneak up behind him and chop him in half. You got to kill him when he's in the back of the tank.
Well, and if you noticed in Rogue One, that isn't necessarily an easy proposition because he does have a pair of Imperial guards standing watch over him while he is in that tank, and I would imagine that does hold somewhat true, especially even here in Kenobi. But yeah, I mean, you want to hit him when he's the most vulnerable. But the problem is trying to get into Vader's fortress on Mustafar. I imagine not even an Inquisitor can do it.
I think they could. They just walk up, "Hey, I'm here to deliver a message to Lord Vader."
Maybe. But here's the thing:
You, you
these are
know,
people.
He's in the tank right now, ma'am. Well, I outrank you. You're just a lowly guard. I'm an inquisitor. Stand down. I'm just saying. I mean, if I'm thinking to myself, okay, if I was trying to assassinate Darth Vader, how would I go about it? You'd get him in the tank. That's the best
Yeah,
way.
yeah, more than likely. And that that does make the most logical sense. And I think you don't try and take him out when he's in his suit and he's armed.
No.
Although the question becomes, you get into that inner chamber, he sees you, just how powerful. I mean, we see how powerful he is even in the suit. I would imagine, even if he is in his back to tank, he's going to sense a presence, a hostile presence. And he's going to be like, oh, you're cute. You're going to try and hit me here? Okay, I'm just going to crush your throat and you're dead. Because here's the thing, you don't need hands to force choke somebody.
Well,
You
they've
just
got
do
to
it.
have like nukes, right? Something similar, some type of missile.
All of the weaponry pretty much in the Star Wars universe is energy based. You've got the two main projectiles that have ever been referenced as proton torpedoes and concussion missiles. And of course, well, the seismic charges on Boba Fett's / Jango Fett's ship. But
What's that? Didn't they use something interesting? You remember that Bill Burr scene in Mandalorian where he's with the officer
oh,
and they're saying, "Yeah, we
the mortars.
firebombed it," or something like that. I'm just saying, nuke Darth Vader's castle. I
Who's
mean,
gonna
if you and
have?
I are, I mean, listen, if we're trying to kill Darth, I'm not sneaking up behind him. I can tell you that. I would figure something out.
But at
Oh,
the
here's
same
a good
time,
one. Frame Vader as being a traitor. Frame
yeah,
him.
that's gonna be hard to pull off because this is Palpatine's right hand guy. They're nobody's gonna be really gonna be like, yeah, no, Even Palpatine's not that dumb. No offense. This is the grand schemer. This is the grand mastermind. This is the Phantom Menace. This is the Dark Lord of the Sith. He ain't falling for some phony baloney frame job on his number two guy. Nah. So I do want to bring up Ferris's comment here because this is something that a lot of people have been discussing ever since the series wrapped or since the series has been going on. Do you think this series needs a season 2? I'm waiting for the Darth Maul series, and he deserves to have one. It would be cool to see him have another saber duel between him and Obi-Wan. Honestly, Ferris, no. Not to crush shit or anything. I'm not trying to be mean when I say this, but honestly, no. I don't think this series needs a season 2. I know Ewan McGregor and Hayden Christensen have expressed interest in potentially doing a season 2, but in terms of having Darth Maul involved, no. As much as I like Star Wars, and you all know how much I love Star Wars, uh, now that one, Zach, you could say out. You could say out loud. If y'all are wondering what Zach said here in the backstage, in terms of the whole frame job on Vader, Palpatine would tell him, Trump voice, "You are fake news."
Totally
Sorry,
fake.
you are totally fake news. This is my man. This is my right hand man. This is my right hand guy. I quite literally gave him both his hands. No, I don't believe you. You are fake news, and I'm now going to vaporize you with my force lightning.
We're going to build a wall around Alderaan.
It's going to be a big, beautiful wall, and it's going to have a shield around it. But then I'm going to have the code to the shield so I can destroy it with my Death Star. But yeah, Zach, what do you think? Do you think I mean, as much as I enjoyed it, do you think this show really needs a season 2?
It's hard to say. I mean, you talk about Maul. I could see a scenario with him being interesting,
Mm,
but only if he was portrayed as like an anti-hero good guy. I think that would be the right way to go with him, similar to the way he was, portrayed in Rebels, kind of working with the good guys. But him working with Kenobi, be very difficult to pull that off. You'd have to kind of show him as a lone wolf, kind of doing his own thing, like a B
yeah.
story with him. Um, but I like the idea of him being more of an anti-hero,
You're
as
talking about
opposed
Maul?
to, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, as opposed to just a straight up bad guy.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm with you though. Do I have reservations about bringing in Maul? Definitely. But again, I like him as being one of the few characters in Star Wars who is like this anti-hero type of guy. After Phantom Menace, he's always been portrayed as like this, kind of sympathetic character who is still kind of a prick, but at the same time has some noble things.
I think the one thing that they did right, especially with Clone Wars and to a degree Rebels, was bringing Maul back in because there was, I think, a lot of people who were on board for them resurrecting Maul and how they did it. Him being kind of, as you said, kind of though he's not a pure anti-hero in Clone Wars, he's more of a he is a pure villain in Clone Wars because he is working against the Republic. He is working against our guys, Obi-Wan and Anakin especially. But I will say this much: in season 7, particularly with the Siege of Mandalore story arc, which was pretty much the finale of season 7, his dialogue to Ahsoka, his dialogue in general, Sam Witmer's dialogue as Maul, him coming back, or well, yeah, coming back because he did the dialogue for Maul in Rebels beforehand, was
Yep. Yep.
absolutely kick ass. Absolutely, absolutely kick ass. And Fook Norris, it's good to see you. And Fook, I will bring up your comment here because kind of to go back to what we were saying a minute ago, make Alderaan great again.
Did you see the private chat?
I haven't yet, but I will. Oh man, it's like you're killing me here. Anyway, um, the only problem is in terms of continuity because what we see in Rebels is Maul's still obsessed with finding Kenobi and finding a way to defeat Palpatine and defeat Vader. And I have to say, though their interaction is brief in Rebels, that last duel, which I absolutely love, that entire exchange between the two of them, where you have a much older Obi-Wan and you have obviously a much older Maul. It was poetic in its beauty, and I think it was a very fitting end to Darth Maul's or just Maul's uh, character arc, which started all the way back in Phantom Menace and even beforehand in the comics that were preludes to Phantom Menace. I know they gave a kind of a post credit scene for him in Solo, and I know that Ray Park did come back for that. I'm kind of on the fence because honestly I'm a little I hate to say I don't necessarily hate to say this, but I will say this. I'm a little tired of Darth Maul. He got, I think, a good set. I think he got a very satisfying conclusion to his arc in Rebels, and I think it should be left there. I think to bring him in anymore would be a little bit of a dilution of his journey.
Yeah, that's fair enough. But I mean, here's the real conversation that I think would get kind of ugly: is who do you hire to play him? Do you hire Ray Park or do you hire Whitwer? Who is probably more similar, Sam Whitwer, to the build of Maul nowadays. You've got
Mhm.
um, the first guy. I just said his name. I already forgot. What was his name?
Ray Park.
Ray Park, um, who is an older gentleman.
Yeah,
At this point in
still in good
time.
shape
So
though.
yeah, definitely. But it's like, who do you hire? Is an interesting question. Who Whitwer kind of took the character over. He kind of made the character his character.
Well,
And
now,
the
here's
first
the
guy,
thing.
Ray Park,
Mhm.
didn't even have his own lines. He did one film.
Mhm. Well, and he had one line. It was dubbed actually. The guy who did the one line who said, "Unless we'll have
Yeah, no,
reveal
I
ourselves
remember.
to the Jedi, unless we'll have revenge," was the guy who played Peter, the roommate in Shaun of the Dead.
Yeah, it's Sarah Finowitz, right?
I
Is
think
that who it was?
if that's the guy's name, yeah, I'll take your word for it. It's been a
I
while
think
since I watched
so.
Shaun. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that guy had a great kind of take on the character too. Very relaxed, very kind of calm
Hmm.
voice, which was an interesting way to portray that with essentially a character who looks like a demon with this kind of smooth, calm voice, kind of creepy.
And I think that was the intent because you never see him never lash out in rage. His movements are very measured, they're very purposeful, and they're very exact. Because Maul was intended to be an assassin first and foremost. That was his function in terms of Palpatine's grand design. So
He probably thought he would be, a king at the end of it,
yeah,
like Vader was.
hmm essentially. Um, the thing you have the same problem with Maul that you had with Ahsoka, because while the voice actor who did the voice of Ahsoka did a grand job, they needed somebody that could act and who could do the physical work. And I know that they did have a stunt double for Rosario Dawson for the Mandalorian. I imagine they will have one for the standalone series for Ahsoka as well. You have the same issue with Darth Maul. Now, granted, as I said, Ray Park is still in very good shape. He works out rigorously and everything. So I think he could potentially come in and he could probably fill that role. Sam Whitmer, him doing the voice portrayal of Maul was absolutely on point.
Well, I think he did
But
the voice in Solo.
he might have. I like I said, I still haven't watched Solo. It's on my to
Yeah,
do
you
list
don't have
amongst
to.
many other things.
Well, there's
So,
better things.
granted, um, but kind of steering back to Kenobi itself, and I don't want to belabor the point. I don't see how a season 2 is feasible because they've wrapped up this series very nicely. They left it with no real loose strings per se. And this is something we have not discussed, and I know it's kind of a minor point, but it was honestly great after so many years to see Liam Neeson back as Qui-Gon Jinn. I did. I absolutely it was an absolute delight, even though it was just for a few seconds or just for a minute or so, to see Liam Neeson back as Qui-Gon Jinn. And his line to Obi-Wan, he's like, "I was here the whole time. You just weren't ready to see me yet." And I have to admit, the master is still teaching, and I can only imagine what the conversations that him and the Kenobi and Qui Gon are going to have in his years there on Tatooine.
So it's a
So
little bit of a missed opportunity, to use him in a more meaningful way.
I would have, yeah. And maybe it was just a matter of scheduling constraints. We don't know for sure. If Liam had something else going on that he was working on at the time, they could only use him for that one scene, and that was it. Maybe.
I doubt it. I mean, the guy's been doing B movies for 10 years.
Yeah. So, and I do want to say hello to the chat. Tim is talk. Tim, it's good to see you. And well, on your left, Tim. Always, it's a pleasure. So, um, yeah. I mean, could they have maybe used Liam more? Yeah. Could they have maybe worked out the
Well,
schedule to where he would have
one
been in?
one scene is fine, but have him at least like give some wisdom or something. I mean, he basically all he says is, so "I'm going to walk with you through this canyon." You know,
I think essentially what we got there was Qui-Gon leading Obi-Wan to where he was going to set up the home that we'll see in Episode 4, essentially, and where he'll spend time communing with him to learn how to transcend the physical realm and become one with the Force upon his death.
well, yeah, I'm happy for him that he's not going to live in a cave anymore.
Yeah, as am I.
Pretty sad to see that.
It made sense though, because Obi-Wan is trying to stay off the grid, stay away from everybody pretty much, and he does for the most part succeed. I mean, you asked a very good question a few weeks ago, Zach. I think in terms of what is the purpose of this story, of this series. I think it is Kenobi, for one, reconnecting with the Force, but also realizing that he still serves a purpose beyond just training Luke, and that he can have a life outside of just that purpose. And him also realizing his own value, and him facing his demon. And in this case, the demon is of course his brother, his pupil, his friend, Anakin Skywalker. I don't know how you feel about that, if that's an adequate explanation, but for me, that's how I see it.
I see it as to make money. I mean, let's get real. But
It is.
but to talk from a story point of view,
Yeah.
yeah, I agree. Those are some themes contained within the show. But again, where the criticism that I would have, and again, it's meant to be constructive criticism. It's not coming from a place of hatred. Is that these shows feel like video game quests, and I don't necessarily like that, where it's like, let's go here, let's go there, let's do this, let's do that. And there is an arc in here for all of the main characters, I would say, but is it hindered by the execution? And see, here's the other thing, is the sequencing of events, the sequencing, the pacing. All of that stuff. Like, I think you could cut this into a great 2-hour film. I really do.
I agree.
I think if somebody came along and said, I'm going to sit down and look at this and cut it together, it could make a great movie. But there's a lot of stuff we really didn't need in the show. I gave an example a couple weeks ago. Like you said, I've done a couple of them here with you, which was the fake Jedi guy being kind of a waste of time. Fun, entertaining, funny guy. I like the actor and everything, but why do we need that?
And I do see your point. I mean, I honestly do. I mean, do I dislike the character? No.
Neither did I.
And the actor, I absolutely loved him as Kingo in Eternals. He was one of my favorite characters.
You know what? I saw it finally.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
Cool. Good.
Not bad. I saw Doctor Strange. They just put that out there. I thought it was fucking great.
Yeah. Multiverse of Madness. For those of you that might be wondering, or may already know, Multiverse of Madness is up on Disney Plus now. I'm actually may sit down and watch it later, or maybe in a day or so. I do want to bring
I fucking loved it. It's a Marvel film, but you can tell there's a real director with a vision behind it. Like even some of the framing, like the way you'll see a picture and it'll fade into the next shot, certain things like that. It's like, that's a real director.
Well, that's Sam Raimi, if you're
Yeah, he's
familiar with his
fucking
work.
awesome. Yeah.
So, if you've ever seen any of the Evil Dead films, if you saw the original, the early 2000 Spider-Man movies, those are all his.
Yep.
And I will say
Very
this, I
talented
think
guy.
he is. He is. I have loved his work ever since I saw the first Evil Dead movie, Evil Dead 2, Army of Darkness. I'm like, I love this guy.
Oh
This is
yeah,
one of
Army
my
of Darkness is great.
I have it on Blu-ray. I don't have the other two. I need to get the other two and everything. I think I have both Evil Dead and Evil Dead 2 on digital, but I really want to get a good like DVD or Blu-ray copy and everything that has all the making of stuff on here. I will bring up Ferris's comment real quick though. I always think I always thought George Lucas sort of misplaced and reduced Darth Maul's role. Do you think that Darth Maul deserved a larger role through the prequels, like being the prequel version of Darth Vader? Um, maybe Ferris, but here's the thing: Lucas did what he did deliberately in terms of having transitioning villains or main villains in each of the prequel films. You had Darth Maul in a Phantom Menace, who was the embodiment of rage or the pureness of how a person can just completely give themselves to the dark side. That was one aspect of Vader. You had Count Dooku, who was the fallen Jedi, to show that even the most noblest of the Jedi, could succumb to the dark side. That was another aspect of Vader. And then, of course, you had General Grievous, who was the cyborg, essentially,
Yeah,
and was
the representation of cybernetic enhancement,
yes. So,
which is
do I?
gross. Which is a gross concept. Having so they in canon they changed Grievous's story that he actually removed his arms and his legs and did this to himself on purpose.
Yeah, from what I understand, Grievous, or he went by a different name that I can't even come close to trying to pronounce,
I
was
think it was
some.
Shahil,
It might have been.
Shahil,
Uh,
something like that.
he was a member of a race of very renowned warriors within the Star Wars universe. He was regarded as one of the greatest. And essentially, what happened was Dooku and Sidious captured him and took him to one of their outposts or whatever, or one of their fortresses that they had in seclusion, and essentially turned him into what we see in um, Revenge of the Sith.
It's
Now,
born Quaiman J. Shalil. I don't know if you guys can see that.
I will. I'll take your word for it. So, but I will say this much for Kenobi. I think the Inquisitors were a bit of a fake out in terms of who the real villain was in this series. Do I think the Inquisitors had their place to a degree? Yes, I do. But the real villain, I think, was honestly the one that we got at the end of episode 2, and that was, of course, Vader. That was the villain everybody was waiting to see. And I will say this, I don't think I was not disappointed in any degree by the performance that the stunt actors and of course Hayden Christensen and of course James Earl Jones all gave for Vader in this series. I think we got a much more layered performance and a much more layered development of Vader as a character. One thing I will say is during the duel in episode 6 between Obi-Wan and Vader, when Vader has him cornered and shoves him into that pit, and he just collapses the entire thing in on top of him, and he just says, this is the end for you, Master, and then just walks away. So, but Zach, let me ask you, of the more antagonistic characters that we got in this series, did you have a standout? Was it Vader or was it somebody else?
Yeah, yeah, it's definitely Vader, but the Grand Inquisitor actually impressed me to a certain extent. When I first saw him introduced, I really thought he was kind of lackluster.
Mm-hmm.
But there's something to the performance. I'm not sure what that is. There's
Mm-hmm.
something to it. There is something to it. The more you see him when he walks up and when he's with Vader aboard the command ship, you're like, okay, there's something to this guy as a charismatic villain. Because at first, he comes on and he's got this really kind of proper British accent, and it's like, ah, you know, when you picture a character like that, you picture almost like it's a gravelier voice, like a kind of a whispery, hissy type voice.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the difference right there. It's like the guy doesn't sound the way he should sound based on his appearance.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that character impressed me towards the end. Riva kind of impressed me too. We've all discussed, at least in these circles, her being kind of lackluster for a while.
Yeah.
And there's certain scenes with her that could have been done better, be it direction or otherwise. I blame some of the direction for her performance. It's like, look at her with Leia, where she's perfectly lit and she's right center frame. Put her in the shadows and bring some shadows in, make her a little creepy with the framing.
Mm-hmm.
But, she can act. She can act. She did a good job with a lot of these emotional scenes at the end.
She did. Yeah.
So yeah, she turned it around. Both of the main Inquisitors started off for me as kind of, again, like lackluster, but
Yeah.
became
And
more and more interesting.
I have to agree. Me and Mam Ambassador, we watched the series together and everything. And we both made the comment that as the series went on, and particularly in episode 6, when she goes to Tatooine and she's hunting down Luke, and she finally corners him in that canyon, and she's knocked him out, and she starts to have flashbacks, and she's hallucinating, and she's seeing herself instead of Luke. And in the end, she can't do it. She can't kill him because she realizes if she does kill him, then she has become what Anakin has become.
Here, this is where it becomes interesting. Is I would have shot and killed her anyway if I was Kenobi or Owen.
Mm-hmm.
Just the fact that she was willing to go that far, I think, is enough to warrant shooting her from their perspective.
Yes, and I get that.
Do you agree?
I do. But I do understand Kenobi's perspective in showing mercy to her, because he does say to her when she asks, "Am I like them?" And he's like, "No, because you showed mercy where he didn't." And he's referring, of course, to Anakin. And he's also, I think Obi-Wan also realizes that she has suffered tremendously ever since Order 66 was enacted, and Obi-Wan, or not Obi-Wan, but Anakin and those clone troopers came into the Jedi Temple and massacred all those younglings and all the masters that were there. And now
Yeah,
she had.
but Kenobi has suffered. I mean,
Yes.
there's that quote. I don't know who to attribute it to, but it's one of those old school philosophers, maybe Nietzsche or somebody, that life is
Hmm.
suffering. So it's like, what do you do with that? I mean, you can live righteously and try to do a good job, and
Hmm.
be a good person, or you can embrace that for your own selfish gain. Like, for example, thieves, right? They don't give a fuck who they hurt if it enriches them. So you can make like a real life comparison to that. It's, I
Yeah,
know she suffered, but in the grand scheme of things, so is everybody else.
yeah, but I think it's
It's not like
also
they killed her parents. It's they killed her contemporaries. Same with Kenobi. He lost the same thing she did.
yeah, but I think it's an interesting mirror of how the two of them reacted. He went into seclusion and he was basically doing the only thing he felt that he could do, and that was essentially watching over Luke. She went down a different road. She sought revenge, where revenge is not the Jedi way, as Vader will say to Ahsoka, or did say to Ahsoka in Rebels. And Riva, in a lot of ways, it's like looking at a Jedi through a mirror darkly. And she is a dark tinted, and this is not in regards to her complexion or anything like that, but in terms of her personality and her philosophy at this point in her life. She is a twisted and broken. Oh, for Pete's sakes. Oh, Zach. Anyway, as I was saying, Riva was twisted and broken by not only the Empire and the Inquisitors, but also by her own need for vengeance. Or as she said, justice. And she was doing what she was doing not just for herself, but for all of the other Jedi that Anakin slash Vader killed there in the temple.
Well, it's a hallmark of the dark side in the Star Wars universe. The way that Lucas framed the concept of bad things for good reasons, it doesn't exist. There's no such thing as doing a bad thing for a good reason. You're just doing a bad thing.
Yes, exactly. And it goes very counter to the philosophy of the Jedi, and that is to not seek revenge. Which is kind of also a okay, it's not kind of it is a part of the Christian belief, as the scripture says, "Revenge is mine, saith the Lord; I shall repay." Do not seek vengeance yourself, but leave it to a higher authority. And I think in this particular context, Riva was so consumed by the need for revenge on Anakin for what he did that it blinded her to what she should have done as a Jedi, and let go and remembered the most important lesson of the Jedi, and that is, of course, even in death, Jedi do become one with the Force, and they do know peace.
Which is why I think Kenobi was so weak at the beginning, is because he was living in fear. There was no peace. He kind of discovers um, his center of gravity again in this
He
show.
does, yeah, he very much does. So, but I know you've got to leave here shortly, Zach. So I'm gonna let you have any final comments that you want to have and everything before you go, and then I may carry on for a little bit yet and everything, uh, and then I'll probably wrap up in a little while. So I'm gonna let you have the floor, Zach. Your final thoughts or any closing thoughts that you have on Kenobi. The floor is
Yeah,
yours.
they did a good job wrapping it up. You know, um, I think Disney needs to be careful. I think they really need to be careful. Um, you've got a situation now where there's so much good stuff to watch on TV, and at this stage in the game, being what they are, as a company and what Star Wars is as a franchise, they need impeccable writing. I mean, we can't have a situation where we have two bad episodes in a 6 episode show. We just can't have that. I mean,
Yeah.
it's at the point now where, with love, I tell them, it has to be impeccable,
It
just
does.
because of the nature of the game. Look at Stranger Things, which was fucking impeccable. Look at all this great stuff on TV right now. Barry, impeccable writing. And by the way, I just saw the first 3 episodes of The Old Man with Jeff Bridges.
I've heard of that.
Fucking awesome. Fucking awesome. It's Jeff Bridges versus John Lithgow. That's the two guys.
Oh boy, that sounds
Can't get
interesting.
much better than that, dude. It's fucking tremendous. So
That sounds
you've got
pretty
so much
badass.
great stuff. So much great stuff. You've got to be on the top of your game in
Yeah.
today's world, man, with TV and with movies and just entertainment. You cannot afford a situation where Star Wars is kind of losing ground every now and then. Why does it have to? It doesn't. You've got to
No,
hire
it
the
doesn't.
right people for the job. And last thing I'll say is Breaking Bad. It's got a 9.5 out of 10 on IMDb, if I'm not mistaken, the highest rated TV show on IMDb. Widely
That's
regarded
impressive.
as some of the best writing of all time.
Yeah.
They didn't start with a plan. They wrote it week by week. So it's all about competence. It's about having writers that have the ability, if you don't have a plan, to solve problems. That's what it's all about. So hire some writers, guys. Take that 20 million that you spent on Harrison Ford to do one scene that didn't really matter and give it to some writers. So I'll leave it there.
Zach, always a pleasure, bud. And
All right.
take
So
care.
overall,
Talk to you later.
Kenobi, I enjoyed it, man. I enjoyed it to a certain extent. Didn't hate it. I would say, I don't know, 7 out of 10. I'll give it a C.
I think that's fair. So,
All right. Good to see you, man.
Zach, you too. Talk to you later. Well, and for those of you that don't follow Zach on social media, go follow him on Twitter. He is primarily there under the real Zach Leary. He gives a lot of interesting takes. He's not super active on Twitter, but when he does drop stuff, it's worth the watch. It's worth the read. He does have 3 separate channels. All 3 of them cover different aspects of both pop culture and movie talk. Well, I hate using that term, but movie review, movie discussion, and also political discussion. So, go check out his channels. One is under his name, the real Zach Leary. The other one is The Last Outlaws, which is his political channel, and the other one is Top Shelf TV, which I have worked with him quite extensively and really enjoyed it. So, but I'm going to go for a little bit longer and everything because there's a few more things I do want to say about Kenobi and just in general about the state of Star Wars right now. And like I said, if any of you that are in the chat right now want to hop in and discuss the Kenobi with me, links there. Use it. Zach brings up a very good point, and I do not disagree because there is a lot of really good streaming series and to varying degrees good television series out there right now. And I'm not saying that Star Wars is in a bad way by any stretch. It isn't. But if they are going to continue with this model of 6 episode limited series, they really, Kenobi was good. When it was good, it was really good. As I said to a friend in a post that he put on Twitter, or not Twitter, but YouTube the other day, when Kenobi shined, it really shined. But there were issues. I will always, as I said at the start of the stream, you all know I love Star Wars. I will always love Star Wars. I just disregard the stuff I don't like. But Kenobi had its issues. I mean, no television series, no video game, no movie, no nothing is not without its imperfections. And that's just the nature of entertainment. You know, even the greatest films of all time, if you really dig down underneath them, they're going to have their issues too. And I think Riva could have been written a little bit better. I honestly do. I say that with all due respect to Moses Ingram. I think her performance, for the most part, was really solid, particularly in the final two episodes, and even the last three episodes, episodes 4, 5, and 6. She really shined in those episodes. In terms of young Leia, in the last two episodes, her part was maybe a little bit diminished, which I think was appropriate considering they were focusing on Obi-Wan and Vader. But seeing her trying to figure out how to get that hatch open there on the base in Jabim was a nice callback to what we see, and of course, wrong finger, Empire Strikes Back. And it did show that even from a young age, she did have a degree of mechanical aptitude, and just kind of further fleshed out her character. This is one thing me and Zach didn't get a chance to discuss, but I'll discuss it here and everything just on my own. I absolutely love the scene. And it's the exchange between Obi-Wan and Leia when Obi-Wan brings Lola back to her because she leaves Lola with him in his cloak. And the entire exchange between Leia and Obi-Wan was just absolutely classic. It was so endearing and so heartwarming to kind of see the Obi-Wan that we had met or that we knew from the prequel films, but just grown and matured a little bit more. And when he tells young Leia, Princess Leia Organa, and I'm kind of paraphrasing here if I don't get this perfect, though I wish I could. You are very wise and discerning and inspiring. And you get those qualities from your mother. And you are fearless and brave and show no fear when you should. And you get those qualities from your father. So you were right when you said that I didn't tell you the full truth. I did know your mother and your father. And I absolutely love, when he says, if you ever have need of a tired old man, you know how to get a hold of me. And the exchange between Obi-Wan and Bail when Bail says things are getting bad around here. The Empire is spreading. Things are getting bad for the people. But we are going to keep trying. And we know eventually what Bail and Leia and the other members that are brave enough within the Senate to stand up against Palpatine and the Empire will eventually do. And I think it was a very satisfying sequence and everything, that whole scene. So, and I do want to say hello to the chat, CJH, person I was just referencing just a minute ago and everything. It was him that I made the comment on his YouTube channel. In regards to Kenobi as a series, when it shined, it shined. So, and CJ, always a pleasure to see you, buddy. Appreciate you popping in. So, that finale was the greatest episode ever. It was pretty damn good. I will agree. Yeah. So, and let's see here. I'm going to rewatch Rogue One now that Kenobi is over. I think that's a good move. I think that's absolutely a really good move. So, because I think these two shows very much, well, Kenobi as a series and Rogue One as a show, they mesh together, I think, very nicely. And, I'm going to make a few more comments here, and then I'm probably going to wrap up before too long. I coined a phrase a few weeks ago, and I've used it on Twitter a few times. I've used it in some of my descriptions for all the series and the movies that we have gotten in the time after the sequel trilogy. And that is, of course, The Mandalorian, Book of Boba Fett, obviously Kenobi now, season 7 of Clone Wars. Obviously, we're getting the Andor series. We've gotten, I think, a very stellar game in terms of Jedi Fallen Order, and we're obviously getting a sequel to that. Granted, I have not read the books or the comics. We've got the High Republic series. I look at all of this new content as the new EU, the new expanded universe. And being a fan of the old EU, the original EU, which started, at least for me, back in 1993 with Heir to the Empire and continued on until 2012. How do I feel about this new EU? How do I feel about the new expanded universe? It is, as was the old expanded universe, not without its issues. Not every comic book, not every video game, not everything within the old expanded universe was perfect. But I think we look back on the old expanded universe because for us, it was, for the longest time, the only thing we had that kept the Star Wars universe going. We had no movies. Obviously, we had no TV shows. The concept of a Star Wars TV show was completely foreign to us at the time. It wasn't until Disney came in, or George Lucas went to Disney and said, hey, do you want to buy it? I'll sell it. And obviously, we know the rest is history. So, but how do I feel about the new expanding universe? For the most part, I have been very happy with it. I have been very entertained, and I have incorporated the things that I loved in it into my head, what I call, or what we call our head canon, into my head canon. And the rest, for those that like it, I say that is your prerogative. You're welcome to like it. You know, in terms of, like, say, for one example, the Bad Batch. I wasn't particularly, I gave the Bad Batch a chance. I didn't care for it. That's just me. I know there are people out there that absolutely love the Bad Batch. That's your prerogative to do so. As I have continued on with this channel, I have strove to be more moderate, though just as passionate in terms of my fandom and my love of Star Wars and other fandoms as well that I'm a part of. I do not have 250,000 subscribers. I don't have 300,000 subscribers. I am just shy of 500. Why do I bring this up? Because it means more to me to be true to myself, to be true to my ideals, and to present myself authentically than it is to play a part, to play things up, to be inauthentic, to hide my face behind an audio avatar or a helmet, and be fake. And I imagine most of you know who I'm referencing when I make that comment. Now, I know some people do use audio avatars because they aren't comfortable being in front of the camera, and that is okay. I have no issue with that. If it makes it easier for you to be online on a stream and not have your face seen, that's fine. That's your prerogative. I will not hold it against you. But the one thing I do have issue with is people who are inauthentic. I do have issue with people who call themselves geeks but have absolutely no idea what it means to be a geek. And I'm going to be a bit passionate here, and I'm also going to be a bit what's the word I'm looking for? I'm going to be a bit blunt. There are people out there, and again, we know who they are. Some of them broadcast from beach houses in Florida that claim they are geeks or gamers. And I say this, and I say it very pointedly. You do not have the vaguest damn idea what it means to be a geek or be a fan. If your content is an indication of who you are off camera, you are not a geek. And you're most definitely not a damn gamer. You're not a nerd. You're not nerdrotic. You're bitter and you're angry and you're pathetic. I was a geek before you, Mr. Geek and Gamer, was even conceived. I was a geek long before you even considered starting your channel. I stand here 43 years of age, and I say this proudly, not because it's a tag or a hashtag. I am a geek, born of geeks. My father was a geek. My mother was also a geek, though neither one of them would ever claim to be such. But they had their loves and they had their passions. And they taught me to stand up for what I believed was right. And I say this. You have forgotten what it means to be a geek and be a fan. And quite frankly, I will say nothing further on that. Because you're not worth the air in my lungs to say any more. And I know I probably will offend some. Fine. Then be offended. Because I am at a point in my life where I, quite frankly, do not care if I offend. Now, if I offend unintentionally, okay, then I own up to that. But if me expressing my opinion about a fandom that I have loved since I was a kid offends you, tough. Because I love this new expanded universe of Star Wars. I am a fan of it. I will call it out for when it is good, and I will criticize it for when it's bad. But one thing I will most definitely not do is sell out my own integrity and authenticity and reputation and my own self respect for a few extra clicks and a few extra subscribers. Because I was raised with something called self respect. That's something that my parents instilled in me when I was young. And on this June 25th, when my father, when he was still, if he were still alive, would have turned 77 years old, I owe much to him. To say I do not miss my father is an understatement. And maybe that's why I am being a little bit more hyperbolic than usual. Maybe not hyperbolic, but maybe being a little more blunt and a little more passionate than usual. Because I owe much to my dad, just as much as I do my mom. They made me the man I am today by their example, by their life lessons, and by the many fond memories I have of him. And that's why tomorrow, I meant to do it earlier this week, but I've decided to go a different route. Tomorrow afternoon, I will be going live with an afternoon with the Ambassador stream, and I'll be doing a retro review for a movie that I know my father would have loved if he had gotten the chance to see it, and a movie that I love just as much. I'll be doing a retro review of the 1983 masterpiece, Amadeus. Because when I said my father was a geek a few minutes ago, he wasn't just any type of geek. He was a band geek. My father was a man of many talents, musically especially. He could sing like a bird. He could play a multitude of different instruments. And he did it with passion. And he did it with joy. And he did it for the gratification of others. He shared his gift. And he shared it with me. And he made me have an appreciation for the musical arts. Because not only did my dad introduce me to the Star Wars universe, because he did, but he gave me a deep, abiding, and profound love for all things musical. And I thought it only fitting on what would have been his 77th birthday to posthumously celebrate his birthday with a review of another musical genius. Though somewhat fictitious and not completely historically accurate, but a absolutely glorious piece of cinema from the 1980s. Amadeus. That is a adaptation of a play that depicted a rivalry between two of the greatest composers of the, I believe it was the 17th or 18th century, Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart and Antonio Salieri. So tomorrow afternoon, I will be going live with that review. I will be doing a full discussion on it, what I loved about it, how it impacted me personally, and why it is so meaningful to me in terms of my father's memory. But with all that being said, both hyperbolically and civilly, I think we're going to wrap up for this evening. I do want to thank my good friend Zach Leary for joining me this evening for this discussion. I want to thank all of you who were in the chat. The CJH, Fook Norris, Tim's Talk, Ferris Geeks World, everybody else that was out there talking or watching on Twitter or Facebook. Thank you all for being here tonight. I hope you enjoyed the stream. I most certainly enjoyed the discussion with you all and, of course, with Zach. So, But you all have a great weekend. What was remaining of it. Be safe out there, obviously. Take care of each other. Take care of yourselves. Stay ambassadorial. And until next time. Sorry, guys. Just a little stiff here. And until next time, this is the Ambassador. Signing off.